Hi, so I researched Nell Noddings for my theorist, and a little bit of background on Nell was that she was born on January 19th, 1929, so that makes her about 80 years old now. She has received a bachelor's in mathematics and physical science. She received a master's in mathematics and then a PhD in education. So she spent 17 years as an elementary and high school math teacher before and she was a school admin before she earned her PhD. And so then once she earned her PhD, she kind of phased out of um, elementary and high school, and she kind of phased into her work on philosophy of education and theory of education and ethics. And so her main focus was on ethics of care. And so we'll go into a lot on that later. Um, she also became Stanford faculty, and then she was the associate dean of the School of Education before she retired in about 2000. A little bit about her personal life. So she stated that she was deeply influenced by her own experience of schooling, and not only her experience of schooling, but her experience in life as well. A lot of where her theory comes from is just her personal beliefs and her personal, um, like where that stemmed from in her own life. And so, along with that, three categories of things that matter to her are domestic life, learning and writing, and then living life as a moral quest. So she raised 10 children, and she was married for 48 years before her husband passed away. And one thing that she stated was that she just loved the domestic life. And as a feminist herself, she said that feminists sometimes find it hard to admit such things matter to them. And so she was um, a feminist, yet she loved domestic life. And so it didn't really fit the standard view of what a feminist is. And so um, she was very confident in who she was and what she believed in. And her approach to her theory was a feminine view. Um, and she didn't mean that males couldn't model and shouldn't model this view, but just that um, it was more of just from a feminine viewpoint on life, or from what society views a feminine viewpoint on life is. And that's kind of where her ethics of care comes from. So her first book that kind of stemmed the rest of her um, education was just caring. So it was a feminine approach to ethics and moral education. And then the rest of her um, articles or novels really stem from that first viewpoint. And so she loved to write, and so she published a lot in her um, time at Stanford, and then also later on as well. And so she was also named outstanding teacher at Stanford. One quote that kind of leads into what we're going to talk about with ethics of care is just, my contention is first that we should want more from our educational efforts than adequate academic achievement. And second, that we will not achieve even that meager success unless our children believe that they themselves are cared for and learn to care for others. So essentially, ethics of care, um, it's the argument that caring should be a foundation for ethical decision making. And so it really started with the idea that every person wants to be cared for, and that natural caring does not require ethical decisions to motivate. So it's just there, it's innate. Um, and this view started from Carol Gilligan's theory. And so Mel Noddings kind of established off that. And so they're the ones that created what this ethics of care means. Um, Another point is just that the physical and mental effort um, might be there when a person is responding to the needs of somebody else, but the natural, decision to care is innate, so it's just already there. And then caring, this idea of caring comes from your experience of being cared for, which is where I think some things of the problems with what we see our students cared for comes from. Um, We see students at home who aren't being cared for in our view of what caring is, but that's what their parents have known or their guardians have known. And so, yeah, it's just whatever, that's where the discrepancy is. And so Noddings also differentiates between being cared for and caring about. So being cared for is what, like, us responding to the need of something by having an action that takes place. And then caring about is just caring about a cause. Sometimes you may give, money to that cause, but there's no face-to-face contact involved. And so Nodding sees education as central to cultivating caring, because at school we can really influence these students to show them what it means to be cared for and what it means to care for somebody else as well. And so she also places a special emphasis on the home life, as you have seen. Um, is just she believes that the caring does start at home, and so that's where the students learn to care, or people in general learn to care. And so schools have to be aware of that, and they have to take action to really facilitate what it means to care for somebody, and yeah, show parents and show guardians what it means to care for their kid or whoever they're taking care of, and also just for the kid's sake, what it means to be cared for as well. So the student is infinitely more important than the subject matter. That's another quote by her, and it really shows that it's the student first. The subject matter will come, but if those needs of the student aren't being met, then that subject matter and that curriculum is not going to matter how you teach it or when you teach it, but the student has to be there first. And then some applications. So there has to be more focus on who the students are, and that we have to teach those personal and life skills that they can use for the rest of their life. Students need adequate material resources at home, but they also need attentive love, which causes a problem because attentive love is very vague, and who defines what attentive love is. And so you can really tell when a student has adequate material resources, but it's a lot harder to see if their needs for love are being met. And then teachers need to use the model dialogue practice and confirmation method in school. And so modeling is just essentially having it's us modeling what it means to care for those students. Dialogue is having those conversations with those students and allowing that dialogue to happen in the classroom. So telling them when a student does something, use that as a way to start that conversation. Practice is giving them ways to in situations to practice, so they can see what it means to care for somebody, and also to reflect on what they did as well, and not just assuming that that's whatever is right, but reflecting on what they did. And then confirmation is just um, affirming and encouraging the students in um, being their best self and being who they are, affirming them in that. So yeah, that is Nell Noddings.